It's years like this when I pray that a documentary can finally be nominated for Best Picture, because God knows some of them really deserve it. Alright, let's go. Part 13 of my Oscar coverage, Best Documentary Feature. Like, we're getting so close to Sunday, and I just have to keep churning out these videos. Please, please, please. By the way, this Best Documentary Feature, there's another category called Best Documentary Short Subject, but I forgot to mention that I wasn't going to do the short film categories because I don't know where to find them, and I can't watch them. And I also don't really know how to evaluate and criticize short films because they are too short, so I don't know what aspect to kind of ignore. But anyway, when talking about documentaries, admittedly, I also don't really know how to talk about them because when you have documentaries, you can't really talk about any acting, you can't really talk about cinematography, production design. The only things that are still there really are direction and in editing, really. So the way I look at documentaries is firstly the craft aspect, like how well is the editing and direction, like the usage of stock footage and interviews and stuff like that. Just how the info is put together, and then the other aspect that I judge it on is the info itself, like how the facts are presented and what conclusions we can draw from those facts. Now, I also just want to mention that just because the subject of documentary is important doesn't mean it becomes better than other documentaries that have more niche topics. It's really like we can't really deal with that. Like, you gotta get rid of that bias, and we just have to look at these things objectively as documentaries. Alright, so let's get right to it. Nominees for Best Documentary Feature are The Act of Killing, Joshua Oppenheimer and Singberg Sorensen; Cutie and the Boxer, Zachary Heinzerling and Lydia Dean Pilcher; Dirty Wars, Richard Rowley and Jeremy Scahill; Square, Jehan Nujaim and Karim Amer; and 20 Feet from Stardom, Morgan Neville, Gil Friesen, and Katrin Rogers. Probably got a lot of those names wrong, I'm sorry, but looking at this list, this is actually a really great list. Like, I had kind of a hard time putting some of these in order, and there's only one of these nominees really that I kind of have a problem with, but the rest are excellent. Seriously, you gotta check these documentaries out. It's kind of sad when people binge watch movies before the Oscars, they kind of skip over documentary in foreign language, and they really should watch these because they are gems. So anyway, at 5th place, and the only nominee here that I kind of have a problem with is Dirty Wars. Now, Dirty Wars is pretty much about this journalist, Jeremy Scahill, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I forgot to pay attention during the movie, but it starts with him going to Afghanistan, and he's investigating like the cover-up of the murder of these Afghan citizens, and that turns into this whole long conspiracy theory almost of these secret wars kind of that the US is taking against its enemies. It's a plus that this movie is very cinematic in the way it's presented. It really doesn't feel like a documentary at points. Like, the way the stuff is presented really feels like you're watching a fictional thing, but it's kind of scary that this is actually real. And the mystery here is always engaging. Like, this topic is very relevant. I'm not American, obviously, but it still is really intriguing. And the way the director and Jeremy are able to kind of connect the dots, sometimes it's a bit okay, like you can just kind of raise your eyebrow and go with it, but for the most part, this is the kind of documentary that really keeps you hooked. And I really like how the story isn't necessarily over, but they were still able to draw conclusions from it. It wasn't like a cheap cop out, but oh, I guess we'll just find out in the next few years. There really was kind of a point to be made, even if this story didn't reach its conclusion, if there is a conclusion. But I like that there was still substance in the journey. But again, like I mentioned, I do kind of have a problem with this. It does kind of come across as kind of indulgent at points, because a lot of the time the focus of this film is more on the journalist instead of the actual facts being presented. And I would have liked the facts to take center stage because they are the things driving it. But a lot of points, it looks like, it kind of feels like this documentary has like a hero, which isn't, like if you're trying to go for a neutrality here, well, that's not necessarily a good thing. Although, what am I talking about? This is pretty much biased towards, the US is doing bad things behind our backs, and they do put up a good argument. But, like I said, it is pretty much conspiracy theory, and at a certain point you just kind of nod and agree. You're like, okay, where are you going with this? And, for me personally, not everything completely tied up at the end, so, that's my problem with it. So it ends up at 5th place for that. Now, 4th place is Cutie and the Boxer, which is this really, really small personal story about these two Japanese New York citizens who are both artists, and it really is a really great portrait of love and art, and how those two things are pretty much the same thing. Love is a roar, as they say. That sounds really pretentious in paper, but this movie actually really resonated with me because I am a student of the arts, and it really just was interesting to see how love and art, they can really intersect. And I really like the approach they took where it becomes very personal. Like everything is set within, like, let's say their apartment, and then just the galleries where they put up their exhibits and stuff never really shows the outside world, and I actually appreciated that because it did keep the focus on them as people rather than how people view them and their art and stuff. And what's so interesting about Cutie and the Boxer is that at a certain point the viewer develops a reaction to the art, because a lot of times when you have documentaries about art and stuff, you're just shown the work and then you're just supposed to know that, oh, this is considered good. But here in Cutie and the Boxer, like the art is very obscure. It's definitely very unique, but no one really tells you if it's supposed to be good or bad. So the viewer is able to come up with his own opinions, and even the married couple in the film, they don't say everything's good, they don't say everything is bad, and then you kind of get to see their point of view as well, and you can agree with it, disagree with it. So I like that. The only thing I can hold against this movie, I guess, is if it's trying to be about love and art at the same time, but I guess there's not enough of both yet, because it is pretty much a love story, but it's not explicitly a love story. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not like they bridge the two, love and art, like that well necessarily. I would have liked to see way more personal stuff. I know that's just me being nosy, and I would have liked to see more of the creation process, because I think that's essential in talking about art. But other than that, Cutie the Boxer is a great, really small, cute documentary. So fourth place. Now third place is The Square. This is about the Egyptian Revolution 2011, I think, and more of also that and the riots that are still happening today. And the biggest compliment I can give this documentary is the fact that it really feels like you're there. You're introduced to a bunch of, I wouldn't call them characters because they're real people, a bunch of these activists and stuff. And just being with them on the streets and in the square and in their homes and stuff, it really makes you feel like you are part of this revolution. Instead of, you hiding behind the TV screen just watching stuff happen, it really gives you a first-hand account of what happened. What I liked is that the square is super in depth without being an info overload. And after watching, I realized that it wasn't, although it is about a political issue, it didn't feel like a political documentary. You get what I mean? It really felt more social than political. It felt like a documentary about how these people reacted and feel about this situation rather than the politics behind it. Obviously, the politics are still present. They do a good job of summarizing what happens in the political scene, but it really is about the people, and I really love that. In terms of craft, the editing and direction in The Square is fantastic. It's probably the best among these five, maybe. Just the way they use certain footage, the way they intersplice wider shots and actual handheld footage that people were filming on the streets, and just it's never boring really, and just keeps moving along, and it's just you really get a sense of place also, which is kind of hard to do for me, in my opinion, in a movie like this. But really, it's just like you get so many different angles, and none of them feel extraneous. All of them feel essential. I really don't have any problems with The Square, other than the fact that the subject matter itself, because these riots have been happening so often, like over and over again, like after a while, it does kind of feel a bit repetitive, and you know, it's never as impressive. All the people in the square is never as impressive as the first time you see it, and they're all chanting. The people demand the downfall of the regime. Like, the first time you hear that's great. And can I just talk about the poster? Like, this is my favorite poster of 2013. Look at it. It's so great. Like, it's just all graffiti and, badass and stuff. And just it's an amazing poster for an awesome movie. It's third place for me. Now, second place is 20 Feet from Stardom. And to be honest, this and the square were really switching places at a certain point, but I ended up with this. 20 Feet from Stardom is it's lighter fare this time. It's about backup singers. And it is, it's such a crowd pleaser. And it's so good because, first of all, the music in this is fantastic. Like, the soundtrack, you've got so many people here. You get to see interviews with Mick Jagger and Bruce Springsteen and stuff. And they have, in between all the interviews and stock footage and stuff, they have these backup singers performing, singing songs solo, and like they are fantastic. Like, it really makes you think, Aretha Franklin and all these big divas, they're the ones who are getting the fame, but there's so many people in the background who are like just as good as them, seriously. You can tell really music is the life for some of these people. Like music is their life, and them performing it really embodies that. But what I like is that not everyone in this documentary has the same reaction, has the same feeling. Some people really do want to stay in the background. Some people really want to become solo artists. Some people have left the business. Some people have stayed, and it just paints this nice mosaic of reactions. It really is just loaded with so much content, especially like archive footage of you get to see Ray Charles' performance and stuff like that. And it really does change the way you hear these songs. Like after watching this, I listened to like the radio and stuff, and I just noticed the backup singers like for the first time, and it's just like suddenly they become actual people. They're not just backup singers. The only complaint I might have about this is that maybe it's a bit too niche, like they don't necessarily explain things for people who aren't knowledgeable about music and stuff, but that's not really a huge problem. Also, like it does kind of take a while to get started in my opinion, just kind of throws you in there and oh, okay, we're supposed to follow this. But other than that, 20 Feet from Stardom is really such an awesome movie, and it's the kind of thing, again, you can just watch over and over again. However, at first place, I'm really gonna have to put The Act of Killing, and this one was just an experience. It's a crazy, harrowing experience. The story here is that director Joshua Oppenheimer went to Indonesia with the intention to interview families of victims of this massacre that happened, like I forgot when, the 70s or something, and instead, like because he couldn't interview those families, like he ended up interviewing the government officials, many of which partook in those massacres, and they are still in power today. And they were so eager to talk about how they killed people and stuff. And he had the idea, Josh Oppenheimer had the idea of, hey, let's make them reenact their own killings using like any film genre they want. And that's so genius, really. It's just, what a process. That's so great. And it really, what happens is that when these killers reenact their killings, it kind of becomes like therapy, number one, and it really exposes how they view the killing process, and that's really morbid, but it's so essential because it really puts a face to evil, kind of like that. Strangely enough, it makes evil people like humanized. I got to watch The Act of Killing last year, and it was on my top 15 list for 2013, and it really does ask such difficult questions. The hardest of which I found was, when does one actually lose his humanity? And can we really just write people off as evil? And even if they've committed all these crimes, what if they become aware that they've sinned? Does that make them bad people? Does that still, one great thing about this documentary is Anwar Congo, who is like the main person Josh Oppenheimer interviewed, and he's such a character because he killed like 1,000 people with his bare hands. But you know the usual image we have of serial killers and stuff is that they're just sad people with no families, no friends and stuff. And this guy is a happy dude. He's dancing around and stuff, and it's so surreal to watch because at a certain point you almost feel sympathy for the guy, at least me, and it's just so hard to justify those feelings, because he is, if you look past all the killings, everything else that he does, he's pretty much a normal person. And I also like how Josh Oppenheimer, he really steps out of the frame. He lets the people talk, and it's kind of like the research showing itself. And what I like is that even if he stepped out of the frame for a while, like near the end, he comes back in and he says something, and it's like he represents us, the audience. Like we spent this whole time watching this unbelievable stuff happen. At the end, he just breaks and says something, and it just captures what everyone else has been thinking. And I really do not have anything wrong to say about The Act of Killing. It's a fantastic movie. It's so difficult to watch, but it's so important. And what I notice is that, something happens in the viewer that, that thing I think Nietzsche said, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but anyway, he said something like, death of one is a tragedy, the death of a million is a statistic. And it kind of happens here. When you first hear that Anwar Congo killed like 1,000 people, it's like, oh, okay, that's no big deal. Then they start getting more in-depth into that, and you realize, oh my god, like he killed 1,000 people. Really, it's such a transformative experience because it affects the viewer personally. As for who I think will win the Oscar, again, I think I'm just going to have to go with The Act of Killing. It is pretty tough, category because documentaries aren't really screened as evenly as feature films. And I think Dirty Wars could take a surprise victory because it's so relevant to Americans. I think 20 Feet from Stardom could take it also because it's just so light and so much happier. I think Square could take it because it's Netflix, and it really is so well done. Cutie and the Boxer, I think, is a bit too obscure and a bit too weird, but I think The Act of Killing is going to get it just because it's been hyped up like crazy. It's been winning awards left and right, and it's just powerhouse of a movie, really. I think it's going to take it. So those are nominees for Best Documentary Feature. What did you guys think of this year's roster? Who do you think should win? Who do you think will win? Whatever you think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.